We begin with the worsening diplomatic spat between Washington and Abuja, with the US President Donald Trump declaring Nigeria a disgraced country. In the past couple of days, Mr. Trump has again taken aim at Nigeria's leadership, warning of sanctions and possible military action to stop rampaging Islamist militants from killing those he described as our cherished Christians. The Nigerian government has continued to reject Mr. Trump's claims. Meanwhile, Christian organizations like the Nigeria Evangelical Fellowship has called on the Tinubu administration to take decisive steps to end terrorism, banditry, and widespread violence across the country, warning that Nigeria's unity and international reputation are increasingly at risk. The fellowship urged the government to respond with clarity and firmness, both to protect lives and to prevent external actors from exploiting Nigeria's internal challenges. Well, all through the week, Arise correspondent Anieze Osakwe has been reporting from Washington, analyzing the growing diplomatic gulf between the US and Nigeria and the threatening hostility from Donald Trump's White House that stunned Nigeria's political leadership. Based on her reporting, many Nigerians have come to understand that we are in the throes of a great relationship recession with America, but that in that crisis is also potentially an opportunity to positively reshape that relationship through constructive diplomatic engagement. And Anieze Osakwe joins me now on the line from Washington. Thank you for joining us. Just remind us of how all this has unfolded in the past week and where we are just now in that diplomatic row.
Absolutely. Charles, I mean, you laid it out perfectly. This week has felt like a domino effect, basically. You know, it started on Friday when President Trump first reportedly was watching something on Fox News where they were making these claims about a Christian genocide, and that was essentially what set all of this off. It was that day that he decided to designate Nigeria as a country of particular concern. The next day, he put out that famous post on Truth Social saying that they would, you know, the U.S. would go into Nigeria, guns a-blazing, and that it would be fast, vicious, and sweet. The next day, again, speaking on Air Force One, he said that he would maybe send in, military strikes, maybe put boots on the ground. And all of this has just gone very, very quickly. This sense of urgency that the U.S. has come forward with, you know, you juxtapose that vis-a-vis with what we've heard from the Nigerian government. And throughout the week, the Nigerian government, different members, have essentially just been reiterating these claims that there's no such thing as a Christian genocide in Nigeria, that yes, terrorism exists, but it impacts Christians as well as Muslims alike. And it's something that Nigeria faces as a whole. We've heard from the Minister of Information, we've heard from the Minister of Foreign Affairs, we've heard from the Chief of Defense Staffs. You know, we even heard from, the Minister of Aviation, Festus Keyamo, who put out this open letter on Twitter to President Trump where he also denied these allegations of a Christian genocide. It was only just yesterday that we heard from President Tinubu for the first time, where he said that we are approaching the situation as a country diplomatically, and he vowed that Nigeria is working to end terrorism. And we also heard from him yet again just a couple of hours ago in a post on his Twitter page, where he wrote, you know, security is non-negotiable and we will never compromise. With unwavering courage and a steadfast commitment to the rule of law, we will prevail. And of course, running in the background of all of this is the fact that the U.S. Africa Command has essentially already has plans about what a military intervention could look like. You know, it could be drone strikes, it could be cooperating with the Nigerian government on how to fight Boko Haram, but it could very well be boots on the ground as well. So you have a lot of conflicting issues that have, you know, kind of come to the fore this week, but we've been following all of it, and I'm sure that next week will hold a lot more as well.
Indeed, and thank you for that very neat and tidy upsum, as we say. And just to mention that yesterday, while we had to break off from talking with you to go and have a chat with the man who used to be the commander of AFRICOM, that US Africa Command, and his contention, without getting political, was that the US is always ready to strike wherever it needs to strike, and that the Africa Command would be ready and waiting for that order to come if it ever was to come. So what does the Nigerian government now have to do to reset the relationship with Washington? And has there been any noticeable moves in that direction?
So I think that from what we've seen this past week, urgency is really the name of the game. And that's a word that I've used a lot this week because everything about the way America has come forward to this issue has been about speed. It's been about urgency. You know, that first post that President Trump made, he talked about how attacks would be fast, vicious, and sweet. You know, Ted Cruz has already put out this bill to sanction different Nigerian government officials. When President Trump called on congressmen to look into this issue, he said in the video, immediately, and I mean immediately, he used that word twice. And I think that all of this just goes to show that, you know, and including with the Africa Command, as you mentioned, the fact that they already have these plans in place. America essentially is ready. And for Nigeria to essentially meet up with America and engage in these diplomatic conversations that we say we want to do, we have to come forward with that equal sense of urgency as well. And, you know, we know that the Nigerian government recently rejigged top military officials. Military leadership has been changed over. We know that President Tinubu also said that he plans to appoint ambassadors. And those are two very critical steps that the Nigerian government has taken within the last few days and weeks. So it does show that there's a sense that the Nigerian government is willing to tackle this issue head on, but there's just this need to emphasize that America is moving fast and Nigeria has to meet them exactly where they are.
Indeed, and in that regard, how difficult will it be, considering the fact that Mr. Trump's, let me call it, optimus rage against Nigeria seems to be on steroids at the moment, and the US military seems to already be moving, as you mentioned, ahead with plans to attack sites in Nigeria?
So because the Minister of Information, Mohammed Idris, and President Tinubu have really emphasized the fact that Nigeria is planning to approach this diplomatically, that's really where the focus needs to be. Like I mentioned just now, it's a really big step that President Tinubu said that he was going to reappoint ambassadors to be able to engage with the U.S. in that way. It's significant, and whoever is stepping into that role, whether they're coming to Washington, D.C., whether it's going to be a phone call, whether it's going to be a meeting with America, they have a lot of work on their hands. I mean, not only do they have to meet America where they are, but there's also this need for whoever is in that diplomatic position to be able to catch up with Nigeria's foreign policy goals at large, given the fact that there's been this vacancy, this hole in our diplomatic relations for almost 2 years. So there's this need for Nigeria to essentially, whoever is going to be appointed into that role, it's a very critical one. Surely they'll be working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs as well as the president, but whoever is in that role, and whether they come to DC or not, they definitely have a lot of work on their hands. So I think that that's something the government really needs to keep in mind here.
So basically, in summary, a very tall order for the Nigerian government. I mean, where do you see things heading in the coming week? I mean, we've just ended one very, very tumultuous week. We're going into another. Where is attention likely to be concentrated as this saga continues?
I think if this week has taught us anything, it's really that anything can happen. I mean, I think there are 3 key places that we could be looking for in the coming week. So the first would be kind of like I, hinted at in your last question, whether there's going to be a call or a meeting. I know that there were some false reports earlier in the week that President Tinubu might meet with some government officials in the U.S. That was debunked, but there is this need for the leaders to essentially have a proper conversation. There's a level of clarity that comes beyond just posts on social media, on Twitter, on Truth Social, or even through speeches. It doesn't seem like either of the governments, as far as we know, have spoken. So I think that in the coming week, it'll be key to see if a conversation, a proper conversation, actually takes place. A second thread I think will be key to watch is Ted Cruz. I mean, Ted Cruz has submitted this bill sanctioning Nigerian government officials, and he has said, he's been very clear that he's going to name and shame all of the governors that he thinks are complicit in enabling this Christian genocide. So it'll be very interesting to see which governors or which officials he decides to call out by name and what those sanctions actually look like. Like we've said, it can be anything from visa bans to asset freezes. And he said that the list would be coming out within the coming days and weeks. So that's another thread we'll definitely be watching. And finally, there's an interesting diversion happening right now within the U.S. government where, we have a lot of Republican officials who are staunchly supporting President Trump's goals in, this potential military invasion. But I reached out to a Democratic congressman on the Africa subcommittee, and he essentially said that this move is reckless. So I think that in the coming weeks, or in the coming days and weeks, we might see more Democrats step forward to speak out against this military intervention, because as a lot of things ultimately end up being when it comes to American politics, everything becomes politicized. The Democrats say that this military intervention isn't something that they necessarily want to see, whereas the Republicans may want it. So I think we may see more Democrats come to speak out against President Trump's plans, but we'll definitely have to just watch and see there.
And it remains for me to thank you, Anieze, for your great reporting and very measured analysis. Anieze Osakwe is Arise correspondent. She was talking to me on the line there from Washington.